Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Vetting America, episode 32. We're live at the Attic Cafe in downtown Tampa. Today's guest is Dr. Diego Hernandez, who is currently Clinical Director of Accelerated Resolution Therapy and Military Research at the University of South Florida. He has over 20 years of mental health experience and has become one of the top combat trauma experts in the country. I'm honored to have all of you here with us today, and I would like to please ask anyone you think that could benefit from listening to myself or Dr. Diego, please share this interview. It would go very far to help people. Thank you so much. And before we get started, I'd like to give a quick shout out to my producer, Anthony Kovic of the Tampa Post, as well as Angel Francisco of S Marketing. Thank you for our sponsors today. So let's just jump right into it. Thanks for coming on today, Doc.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So tell us a little about your work at USF with veterans and in leveraging art therapy to treat symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, so ART stands for Accelerated Resolution Therapy, and it's really based on how memories form and how to bring them to a resolution. And so there's been an evolution in therapies over time. It's like if you look at the whole history of looking at post-traumatic stress, and now one of the things we're looking at doing is redefining how we look at it.
Okay.
So just a snippet, the ART is considered an evidence-based approach. We have our federal recognition for that. We've had 3 large studies with some smaller ones combined. And most people have found benefit in an average of 3 to 5 sessions. And we have over 300 people in Army Behavioral Health who are trained. We're being currently evaluated to see if that's going to go further. And then we have 2 studies going on right now. One of them is in the VA in Kentucky. And so it's we're consulting, but it's a whole separate group. So that's like science is like other people doing it, showing that it can be done in their hands without our influence. And then we have a small one here at Hospice, and it's funded by the NIH, National Institute of Health, and it's for complicated grief, and that's a 4-session protocol.
Wow.
So these are individuals who are 60 and older who have lost a loved one through a hospice and either have complicated grief or some other traumatic loss in their life.
So let's talk a little bit about what is post-traumatic stress exactly? What's the science behind it, and kind of how does it occur in the brain?
Well, the interesting thing about post-traumatic stress is that the definition has continued to evolve over time. And right now, in its current form, it's very, very broad. You can have over 4,000 different combinations of symptoms and stuff to cover it. So I kind of rely a little bit more on the definition of the DSM-4, which kind of breaks it down into really, you've got this experience stays unintegrated.
Okay.
Because of that, you start responding to the experience. Your nervous system stays overactivated. A lot of the behaviors that people engage in, like numbing and drinking and trying to back out, they're trying to keep their nervous system calm. And what happens is, and
That's
it's
incredible,
like,
and without even knowing they're applying medicine that it's because it's a depressant. So alcohol is a depressant. So basically, they're just like, please just stop. They don't want the synapses to stop firing off so intensely.
Yeah, alcohol suppresses the activity of the central nervous system. Think about the medications that you get from the VA and through other approaches, which sometimes medication isn't even necessary to get someone to the point where they can not get worse.
So what got you started in psychology and more specifically combat trauma?
My grandfather's a veteran. He's 30 years in the Air Force. His last duty station was MacDill. I'm from Detroit, so we would come down every summer to visit. And it's like, my dad's Army. I wanted to go in the Army, and my grandfather kept telling me, he's like, go in the Air Force. It's easier. Go in the Air Force. And it's just been this long course, interacting with the military and veterans at different points. But about 10 years ago, when I finished my doctorate, I was a therapist before that, so I had to work and go to school in order to afford going to earn my doctorate. The doors just opened wide open. It's like, I applied for postdocs in the military, all this other stuff kept getting beat out, and then as soon as I finished, the doors opened wide. And one of those was the research at USF.
Okay.
And so our study's been with civilians, with active duty, with veterans in a variety of situations, in the jail, homeless population, and then we created some satellite sites too. Again, it's like you want to replicate, teach other people the approach, see what kind of results that they get from that.
So tell me more about what's going on with USF. You're the director of clinical research, correct?
Yeah, it's a smaller role at the moment because we have the smaller study with with hospice.
Okay.
We just finished up a study with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and yoga for post-traumatic stress.
You got to send that to me when you have a chance. I want to read it.
Yeah,
that's going to be incredible.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Because my buddy, he does kung fu, and we're very similar. He did kung fu for 12 years, MMA for 20, and then now he's in BJJ. He said, I don't get punched in the face anymore. So so now he just gets elbowed in the face. But he even stated how he's very much like us and like myself in terms of just very intense and a lot and is in his head a lot. And he said that BJJ has helped him calm down so much, especially in his older years. He's about to be 30. So like in this time now, it's like so useful for him. It's almost therapy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know? And those are some of the factors that we're looking at. And a huge one is camaraderie and fellowship. It's like, you spend your whole life accomplishing all these things with groups of individuals. And then all of a sudden you're out. Like Sebastian Junger talks about in his book Tribe, and then you're out on your own. And you have to reconnect. You've got to reestablish yourself. On one of our retreats, one of my guys was saying, and he brought some of his battle buddies with him, so we kind of try to get that group together, and he stopped the conversation. He says, look, he said, everything we did in basic we did together, everything we did in deployment we did it together, everything we did when we ran ops we did it together. What makes you think you can do this by yourself?
I know, and that's the isolation is. It's so weird. I know that me isolating is the worst thing I can do for myself, but at times it feels like the only thing that I can bring myself to do.
Right.
And it's how to get past the thoughts of it, and then just to put yourself out there. It's that separating that your thoughts aren't you. Your thoughts aren't necessarily even real.
Well, your thoughts are trying to make sense of your experience, and what you're dealing with is the nervous system gets activated and these memories get stored differently. It's considered subcortically, and they're free floating. It's like I've been working with Vietnam vets, Korean War vets. It's like they're feeling like they're 19 again when that memory gets activated, because it's stored there for a protective purpose. It's your nervous system trying to protect you. So when you're in a similar situation, you have a quick frame of reference. When you're out of danger and things start to slow down, then your brain goes, hey, let's check out that dangerous stuff and let's move it away into the past. Okay. So then you start, that's why, 2 or 3 years out, people are thinking about this stuff, or you have an accident or an injury or something where you stop and your brain naturally does a life review that says, hey, I need to look at how have I dealt with this stuff in the past to go forward.
Okay.
Memory's learning. And we've learned about life, and we've learned things, yes. and we're designed to rely on that. So, anyone who says, "Oh, my past has no bearing on me," it's like they're, not really well integrated, and full of shit.
Absolutely.
Because everything we do has some bearing on us, and when we tune into it, and that's where I blend a lot of mindfulness and performance stuff. It's like when we tune into that experience and what it's telling us, we can actually make decisions and process information more quickly. I mean, even emotions are a combination of experience and sensations, and memories that are associated with them.
That makes so much sense. What I love is just that you built this entire career based on helping to explain phenomena that have been in the history books for thousands of years. I mean, there's stories of Roman soldiers keeling over on the battlefield and just losing their minds and crying because we don't talk about a lot of history like that because it's usually it's very heroic and it's very it's story based. But PTSD and trauma isn't anything new to the human race, and to see where we are now with it, and learning about it, learning how to deal with it, learning how to overcome it, when in the thousands of years in the past we didn't have any of that. It was just all repression and trying to deal with it with other forms of medicine at the time. And so it's what are some of the therapies and outlets you've used with your veteran patients to help improve their quality of life beyond just art therapy?
Like I was saying, it's a blending of some of the human performance and sports psychology. A lot of it is mindfulness based. And mindfulness is...
Explain mindfulness to the audience. Exactly what is mindfulness?
Mindfulness is these practices and conditioning of your nervous system and your attention. So it's like, if you think about it, it's like when you look at samurais and you look at all these other warrior traditions, they all have this mental and spiritual component that guides them and that gives them a framework to understand what's going on in the body and how to use the body and how to work the body. We're kind of disconnected. Everybody gets trained for their MOS, and you need this training, that training, this training, and it's not really all that well integrated. And then that's why it's like you don't have that training to go out into the world. And so right now there's different groups who are bringing yoga and meditation into first responders, into the military. The SEALs have been doing, breathing techniques and, mindfulness, yoga, and a bunch of other stuff. Then you see that same interest across sports. It's this really interesting relationship because about 15 years ago, the Army started to realize it's like, well, especially with your operators, that they're athletes. So we need to start thinking and use the resources and the technology that's coming up to train and condition individuals. And so then it's actually kind of going back and forth now too. It's like people are leaving SF and developing these workout programs and all this other stuff to help other people condition their bodies and develop a sense of discipline and regimen in order to accomplish the personal and professional goals they have.
It's so true. I mean, the foundation of, since I've been transitioning, I'm going on 5 years now since being out of the Marine Corps. It still has, even in the Marine Corps, your physical fitness was the foundation of everything. And to me, right now, my physical fitness is still the foundation for me to then be able to grow and work on my emotional conditioning, my spiritual conditioning, my psychological conditioning.
Absolutely.
But if my body isn't in the right place, then the rest of my systems are off. So let's talk a little bit about your private practice here in Tampa, because you were talking about mindfulness and working with athletes, and you treat veterans, but of course that's not all you treat. You treat athletes and business professionals who focus in wellness and performance. So let's talk about how both those types of patients, veterans, and then business professionals and athletes, how they correlate with one another in the types of training that they need and types of therapy they need to overcome some of the shortcomings and insecurities and mental deficiencies to make them stronger and better than they were before they came to you.
Well, a huge part of it is being able to frame experience from a physiological perspective.
Okay.
We use judgment so much in our society. I mean, anybody makes a political comment on Facebook, people really aren't looking to resolve or understand. They're just trying to prove their point. It's like it's like the country's in a really bad marriage, and it's like, and everybody's shouting because they just want to be heard.
Yes.
They're not interested in finding a solution, and so providing some of that context of what that environment does to the nervous system from the broader context to even the workplace or to the family, and helping to kind of reframe experiences. And then a lot of time I'm helping people work through some of those earlier experiences in life that activated the nervous system in such a way that most of us get through life by, it's like this situation makes me feel uncomfortable and I have to manage it. I'll just give an example. It's like when I taught college, I really worked hard to integrate, no matter how weird the question was, into what we were talking about and keep the class going and keep it on target. One year I had a student who was just so argumentative. I had a really difficult time, and it would just disrupt the entire class. And I worked hard to address their question and try to bring them on board, but just kept going back. And then one day the student just kind of lost it, and he starts just ranting and raving. And he's like, "And I can't stand you because you're just like my dad, and my dad does this." The whole class goes, "Oh."
Cause and effect.
Yeah, and I'm like, I really can't help you with the stuff with your dad, but we can talk about it after class if you want. But what we're talking about is how neurons work. It's like, it's so and it's a type of learning, and so that activates the nervous system, and it stimulates this type of learning. And when you stay in that elevated state, that type of learning is ongoing, and it limits our ability to think and predict the future. Like if I'm working with somebody who is transitioning out of the military, and it's not on their timeline early, and they don't have a plan, and they're kind of freaked out about it. How am I going to pay my bills, take care of my family, everything else? All real world concerns. What happens is the body treats that as danger. Yes. So it's going to narrow its resources down to the danger. The resources you need to plan for the future, they're not there.
Nope.
right? It's like you're sitting there taking fire and you're not sitting there, oh man, did I turn that assignment in for that class? All that stuff is out the window because your body's trying to survive. So when you're stuck in that hypervigilant state, you don't have access to those resources.
Way.
Yeah, you don't have those resources there that you need, and that's why people are like, I don't know what to do. I can't decide, because the resources you need to help look at the options are not accessible.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, a lot of analysis paralysis.
Yeah, and so that's where the mindfulness and everything else comes in. So I frame a lot of the experiences. It's like, here's the current experience. It's like, okay, so it's like maybe it's running a meeting or something, and it's a stressful thing because the players were involved in the meeting. So we work on just the environment, trying to identify the environment, look at all the players, the different components and stuff, but also internally, what memories are you drawing on in order to filter that information in order to make a decision? And so a lot of times when it pulls on the stuff, just like with the student I was talking about, then we could use the formal ART, basically process that memory, move it to long-term storage, and then focus on performance, set goals and being able to use those same senses. So what happens is when those other memories get provoked, what we do is we have to exert energy to manage them. When we exert energy to manage them, and part of that management is the withdrawal.
Yes.
I was working with somebody, 30 years, Special Forces, and we've been spending time working through the memories, and he's like, I got to bring my wife in here so she can, so you can explain some of the stuff to her. It's like most people, it's like, your equipment, people's lives depend on it. Some of this information is just like, don't mess with Dad's tools. Dad gets really upset because he was trained because people's lives depend on it. So it's a lot of that training and conditioning that we're starting to apply in this other environment. And so he's like, well, yeah, just explain it to her. And so I start talking. So she starts, she has this need to be heard because it's frustrating for her too. And so he starts just kind of backing out. And she goes, look, there, he's doing it right now. And I'm like, look, lady, he's doing the most loving thing he can do for you right now. She's like, what are you talking about? I says, he's been killing motherfuckers for 25 years when he feels like that. It's like his body is trained to respond in all kinds of environments, and you're increasing the tension by pushing him in that situation, and so the only thing he can do is back off. And now there's some truth to that, especially just as guys in general, but when you've been trained and you've been conditioned to respond, it's like, okay, nervous system activated, I need to take an action, but there's no action to take. So then that starts feeding on itself, then it becomes anxiety, then you start having problems, in work and with people and situations, then you feel bad about it. Then what do you got? Depression, right? That's just kind of like, a lot of times I tell people, it's like, you feel like shit because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's like, it's hard for you right now.
We don't look at it, we don't explore it, we don't deal with it. We think that, we're weak, that we have these emotions, we're weak for feeling this way, for not feeling adequate, for not, being enough.
Yeah, and then you want to go back, because I didn't feel weak, when we were running ops. I didn't feel weak on patrol. I knew my purpose then and there and what was going on, and I was successful and I was being rewarded for it, especially on a very physical, visceral level.
Yes.
So it's making that shift again to, it's like, how do I get rewarded for these things in this environment? How do I apply my skills and resources? It's like, there's so much that the training and experience that military service has to offer the civilian world. It's just translating it. And being able to wrap our minds around it and start applying it in a different way.
So what are some of the correlative problems between business professionals, professional athletes, and veterans, especially the special forces? Because those tend to be very high performing groups. But yet you treat them all almost, it seems like almost the same way, and maybe translate it differently. But overall, it seems like the foundation of your treatment is basically the same. What are some of the correlations you've drawn between these three groups, which are completely different in society and in the world, but yet they're on like almost the same plane of thought?
High performers seek good coaches and mentors. High performers seek feedback and input because they want to improve. And so it's like some of the guys that I work with an injury, It's like, that's the hard part. It's like you've been playing in the Super Bowl for the last 3 or 4 years, and all of a sudden you're out.
Yes.
And then you don't even know how to tie your shoes anymore. But you remember you know how to tie your shoes. And it's starting to reacquaint yourself with your body through the injury and working through that. And again, finding that feedback. We're designed for feedback.
Yes.
That's why so many people like going to the range, because you get immediate feedback. You know, your weapon is your tool.
Yes.
But there's other tools that we can develop to get that kind of feedback.
Yes.
But we have to be able to tune into it. The hard part is we can't tune into it when we're jacked up. And what we know how to do is to push towards the next goal,
Yes.
that goal-directed behavior. And so it's being able to slow down and be able to use the other resources and stuff. And so there's something else to ride a motorcycle too. So we talk about smooth as being fast.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's
Yeah.
one of the best Marine Corps slogans I've heard.
Yeah. It's just like tactical breathing. It's like if you manage your body, you increase your accuracy.
And everything. See, again, I'm starting to study how we are in our bodies. You know, we're not these labels. We're not our names. We're not anything. We're ethereal beings, spirits in this universe, and that we're just our bodies are basically our vehicle to explore and learn this world through. And there's so many people and so many religions and so many different systems of living that downplay how important keeping your body in the right state is for your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, your relationships, every aspect of your life. Again, that's why I stated the body is foundational, because, you know, how are you going to continuously grow and become better if you're dying? How are you going to continuously grow and get better if you have an ailment that's taking all of your energy and all your thought and all your focus just to not be in complete, absolute pain at all times?
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting about business professionals, the professional sports athletes, and veterans, specifically the special forces, is it's the people who perform at the highest levels, even in business, sports, or in combat. They're always in the best shape, you know, in a way, physically, mentally, emotionally.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, over the last 20 years, what are some of the hardest things you've had to overcome trying to get through to the veteran community in terms of reaching out for help and like you said, get those mentors, get those coaches, get that feedback? It seems like all we have is feedback in the military, and then all of a sudden we get out and we don't want anything anymore. You know, it's like, what were some of the struggles you've had to deal with over the last 20 years, but also what are some of the wins you've experienced and some mentality shifts?
Well, the biggest struggle is building relationships. So right now, all of these nonprofits and these groups that are being active are being led by veterans. And so I talk with folks all the time about, it's like you need a new mission. You need a personal mission, you need a family mission, you need a community mission. And if you start breaking each of those areas of your life down as a mission, then you know how to proceed. It's those become the goals, but then that becomes what you're invested in. It's like, and to your audience, if you haven't seen McCraven's talk, you know, he talks about the first thing you do, you get up and make your bed.
Yes.
Colonel Mann talks a lot about that too, is a ritual and regiment. And one of the groups that I'm also involved with him is two separate groups. One of them is the Hero's Journey, which is veteran storytelling. And then the other one's Spartan Rising, where Scott, it's a leadership group, and Scott teaches a lot of what he still teaches young Green Berets who are graduating. It's a lot of great stuff, but it's that ritual and regiment, and it's like if you organize these things and you build these things into your life, you free yourself up to focus on other things. What was the Steve Jobs talking about? He wears the same thing every day. So that's one less decision that you have to make. There's ways to organize your life and structure some of these things so that way you also get the things you need, like rest and nutrition. I also work with a couple of different local physicians who have a background in functional and integrative medicine, and with an incredible nutritionist who has her background in functional medicine. And it's looking at the entire health. So I mean, there's so many factors, like after an injury, or like especially like TBIs and things like that. Stress and alcohol lowers your testosterone. If your testosterone bottoms out, your risk of suicide goes up. because there's this kind of weird relationship without what your body needs to go forward and to do things, and that suicidal thinking. Some of the stuff that we're learning about the gut and the gut health, about basically, I'm oversimplifying it, but Alzheimer's has something to do with the gut. The majority of our serotonin is produced in the gut. So our gut health is not varied enough. That's why the whole thing with probiotics and stuff, and then I'm sure you can get some physician out here who'll start arguing all that, but it's an area that's being pretty thoroughly researched, and there's really some really interesting findings. If you think in terms of having a gut feeling,
vagus nerve.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's tied in together, but we're also learning too, it's also tied in for the immune system. It's also tied in for serotonin and stuff.
So
when we eat stuff that's killing off the good bacteria, then it's like, then we have problems like taking antibiotics all the time, and now there was some tentative research that's with rats looking at some of the preservatives in food and how the nitrates act like antibiotics and kill things off. So if you're eating a bunch of lunch meat and beef jerky, it's like your gut health probably sucks. And usually people were able to tolerate stuff for a long period of time, especially when you've been through some difficult and intense stuff. And so we just tolerate this stuff until it's just intolerable. And then at that point, it's like our typical medications are. It's like, oh, let's reduce this, let's reduce that, or let's take this thing out that you probably don't need. But they're not thinking about how the body works as a whole system. It's an older view, which is called, it's more Cartesian. Descartes, the guy's like, I think, therefore I am. Yeah. He envisioned the world in his philosophy as a big clockwork. Everything was in its pieces, working, organized, and all you gotta do is replace the pieces. And what we've learned is that it's more like a jungle. Our bodies are these biospheres that we have, and looking at the influence of all how we eat, how we sleep.
We're each our own individual universe.
Yeah.
Made up of the universe, in a world made of the universe, with other beings made of the universe. And what works for one person or one thing doesn't necessarily work for the other person, the other thing. And that's what makes life so beautiful and so just flabbergasting, is how all of this intelligent design that we have, and yet we still try to lie to ourselves about the importance of it. Like talking about nutrition 20 years ago. What was nutrition? 20 years ago, it was the yo-yos and ding-dongs, and sourdough bacon cheeseburgers.
And then the food pyramid, brought to you by the American Dairy Council. It's basically advertising for them.
Yes.
Part of it is really living in a consumer culture, and the culture is based on consuming, not necessarily what's sustainable. And you have to look at the same thing in your life. It's like if you burn up all your energy, it's not sustainable.
Yes.
So how do you find a balance within your daily life and with your goals, with your commitments and all of that? And so if somebody comes to me for coaching because they want to manage meetings better, or they want to be better at public speaking or giving presentations, we look at that whole domain. And work through those memories and work through those scenarios, and then also work on practicing for future events, being able to visualize yourself in the future doing those tasks.
I do believe visualization is imperative. I've done a lot of research in the last year on frequencies and vibrations and quantum physics, and how the consciousness they're finding that consciousness exists on the plane of the unmanifest, which is kind of supporting this idea that we can create our own universe, we can create our own reality by just thinking. Because if you really think about it, everything you see, everything we touch, everything we use, it's been created from thought. It started with a thought, and then it took our bodies and our dexterity and all the other physical mechanisms to make those things a reality.
Right. The Greeks were onto something in that regards, believing that things were made out of these, not just a physical substance they call an atom, but that the ideal version of something that we create exists somewhere else, and all we're doing is reproductions. I mean, if you think about all the stuff that's sitting around us now, it's all things that were mass-produced. It wasn't necessarily handcrafted. This photo looks like somebody took the time and care under these conditions to create this thing, and then they just printed off a bunch of them. We live in that environment, so it's like we need to be situationally aware with what's going on. What are the forces that are operating on us? Okay. Just like the news. The news tunes into our nervous system to overactivate it. I tell people, take a mental health break and get away from the news and politics, because it's like both the news and politics, they work to stimulate that fight or flight response. Danger, danger. I mean, there was a Saturday Night Live skit with probably about 15, 20 years ago.
When it was good Saturday Night Live. Dana Carvey,
yeah.
Mike Myers.
Oh, yeah. I'm still trying to remember the dude's name. Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld was on there.
Yeah.
And he's doing this fake newscaster, and he says, there's a common household product that will kill you and your family in your sleep. Find out in our special report next week at 11. Right? If they're going to kill my family, tell me now.
Yes.
You've just alerted my danger response. And that's the same thing with politicians and stuff. It's like they use all this illogical stuff, the slippery slope. It's like, oh my God, everything is worse. But it's like, there's some really neat books out there. This one's probably about 15 years old now. It's called The Culture of Fear. A number of books like Why We're Afraid of All the Wrong Things. It's because all this stuff is just stimulation. And it triggers a type of learning that's related to post-traumatic stress. So what we're doing is we're living in a stressful environment with these little tiny traumas that are going on all the time, and then we're feeding into it. And so what we do is like we keep watching it, because it's like, you know, exactly. To be able to avoid the danger, we need to keep watching for the danger, and that's how they keep us hooked.
Yes. My favorite is Tucker Carlson. He's just like, the fear mongering. It's, well, I don't, you know, it's all news and they're all fear mongering, but I find like the late night Fox News Channel hosts are just. I'm watching the news and I can walk outside my door. I can talk to my neighbors. I can collaborate. I can corroborate. I think this city's beautiful. I think this earth is beautiful. And all of a sudden you watch the news and the world is on fire. Everything's coming to an end. You know, the second coming is next. You know, and it's just, you got to think about all the other traumas we have experienced in our life. You got to think about all the experiences we've had, and then that's what they're doing. Like you said, is taking these instances that probably won't even happen, haven't happened, and they're as if it already happened, and it's triggering us to feel a certain way, and our entire society is getting sick because of it.
Because the nervous system is staying that activated. We can't rest. It interferes with our hormones. It interferes with our immune system. We're sick more often. We're tired because we're staying up late watching something like that, which activates your nervous system. I mean, even something as simple as having lights on at night actually stimulates the pituitary gland and sends the message to the brain that it's daytime, it's daytime, it's daytime. You know, we're designed to sleep, you know, in this environment, this 24-hour environment. You can survive sleep deprived for a certain period of time, and then your body's just going to kick in and take over and put you to sleep. It's like, so we're trying to do all these different things for different reasons, and part of it is we're overstimulated during the day, and so we'll continue to like watch something because we're trying to soothe ourselves with another consumer product. You know, with entertainment, with music, with food, alcohol, other things, and that keeps the economy going, you know, rather than spending time with the people we care about, you know, maybe listening to music and, you know, enjoying their company and conversation, like the Greeks call the middle way, you know, not poverty, but not so much excess.
Balance.
Enjoying people's company and conversations.
Yes, you know, and a lot of religions hit on the key is, and everything is balance. And that's something, since I've been out, because I'm an excessive person. I'm a Marine, so everything's all in or not at all. I work out till I can't move. I eat till I can't breathe. I drink till I can't think. You know, and because of that, I've shocked my system so many times over and over and over again my whole life that now I'm trying to find that balance where not overeating, not over drinking, not overdoing any of it. And so I've cut out TV during the week and I only watch it on the weekends. But what I'm noticing is, so right now one of my shows I'm watching is Punisher. And all it is about a dude who just kills people. And it's fantastic. But it's not good for my brain. And the more I've become conscious of my consciousness and how I feel during the week when I'm not watching television, all of a sudden I'm sucked into that entertainment world for 2 days on the weekend. And then Monday, I'm a little anxious. I have a little bit of hypertension. It takes me a little bit to get into my routine. And so this weekend, other than the Super Bowl, of course, I'm going to cut out TV altogether. And I want to see how I feel next week going into the week if it's completely cut out.
And that's what I recommend for folks. It's like whether it's this food or whether it's this or whether it's that, try it for a while, see how your body responds to it. part of the reason people binge watch, and I've done that too, you get into a great show and to a great story, you enjoy it, we need a break. We also need to take time to take a break, to look outside and to walk outside, and to, rather than going from the house to your car. It's like, in Florida, it's beautiful here, and I'm fortunate enough to travel around the country and the world, and so I integrate time. And so I'm not just going from the house to the car to the airport to back to the rental car to the hotel, to explore the area, to go see stuff and to meet people, have conversations, and just really kind of explore my world. A lot of times the folks that will either host a training or a talk that I'm giving, want to show the guest around and make the most of that
Yes.
of that time.
Yes.
But we've got to take the time to consciously try to integrate it into our life, and to think in terms of what do we have to gain by it. And a lot of medicine is really, it's not designed on health, it's designed on dealing with a problem.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons why that we define post-traumatic stress as a problem. Even in the DSM, if you go through it, and this was part of what my dissertation was on, about reconceptualizing some of this stuff, it says that there are other ways to conceptualize this phenomena, what's happening. Some of them are more effective. But because we in our culture rely on the medical model, we're going to define everything within medical terms. So a lot of times that definition doesn't necessarily fit. So even in our research so the ART is an emerging therapy. It's an emerging neurological intervention, along with a couple other ones too, like RTM and
RTM protocol.
And the common roots of both ART and RTM are in EMDR and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And neuro-linguistic programming is focused on the memory and the experience, and story. And so that's what we do, is we focus on processing that story, moving it from that short-term storage to long-term storage so it becomes integrated. If anyone's interested, more information about that, Bessel van der Kolk has a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And he breaks a lot of this stuff down about what's going on in the body, when you're in these challenging situations. So for me, I believe that post-traumatic stress, needs to be redefined. That even in the intense, version of it, that would be a separate intense version of it, and it's still more like type 2 diabetes. It's an acquired condition that provokes other problems in the body. So if you're prone to anxiety or depression, you're going to have more of it. Depending on the intensity of the experiences and the social support and the other factors, it's going to determine what's going on. That's why a lot of people just keep going. And working with our older veterans, it's like once they stop, they retire, or they get sick or injured, then all of a sudden their body naturally does a life review, and it's going to go back and investigate all that stuff. And then that's where then my interface with myself and another behavioral professional. But these emerging therapies are looking at how the brain works, how memory is stored, and how we can resolve that memory to where it's like, it's not about managing triggers, it's about getting rid of the trigger. It's about moving it to another long-term storage. So the other thing that happens is when you're being triggered by these memories, and a trigger is a memory being activated. I know we use it in our culture with differently. It's like somebody's getting really upset, they're being triggered.
It's the same idea though.
It's similar.
If you're getting upset if you're being triggered, something in your past correlated this negative emotional response, and so now that it's in the present, they're being brought back to that memory and that feeling they had, and it's all based on mostly your ego, unless it's PTS, where it's a memory that's stuck in your brain, and so they feel like they need to defend themselves.
But it can also be an ideal that you're invested in, or an affiliation that you have, your tribal sense of who you are.
There you go, tribalism.
So that gets triggered, and people get upset and they get angry and stuff like that, and it may or may not be triggering things from the past. So if you're having an event, let's say flashback or something of an IED, and you're having similar sensations and stuff, what that does is your brain will totally focus on that. Its resources are only limited to survival, and you're not really paying attention to what's going on right now. So your emotional response with the current event is being impaired by that event. So once we resolve that event, and then we start working with people to reconnect with their current emotional response. So if you get upset with somebody at work, your boss or coworker or something like that, and it's triggering this other, let's say it's your first LT, who's just out of school with no experience, but wants to run everything like they've been there and back. And they've made decisions. They made decisions that have cost people their lives. People are injured. Things were hampered. Because of that attitude. So now you're in the workplace, and some guys doing the same thing, talking about how great they are, and they're like making a lot of mistakes. But because overall they make the company enough money, we're just going to overlook this stuff and and get rid of those other people because this person is more value because they're bringing in the money and the reward. So you can't really internally process that situation because it's triggering this other one. So you're over responding or withdrawing and under responding. So you sort this other situation out, then you start focusing on the situation at hand. I'll give you one example. I worked with somebody who they had a tremendous amount of anxiety, but just kept pushing through it, especially public speaking. And they did it a lot. And then they had an event they had to go to and drive with their boss. And so we had worked on it, and they had gotten much better, much more comfortable in this situation. And driving with their boss, she said, I never realized how anxious my boss was. She's worse than I was. And that's why she's driving instead of flying. And she put me in charge, and I had to take over the meeting and do everything else too. It's like, I didn't notice this because I was so anxious.
She was so in her own head.
You're so focused. Well, it's more in your body.
True.
So again, being in your head is you're trying to make sense of what's going on in your body.
Right. Yeah.
And that's why when what happens in your body changes, what happens in your head changes.
Wow.
So some of the other therapies, like cognitive processing and other things like that, they try to get you to write out a narrative and start changing the narrative and everything. When you're working from the approach of the body, the brain automatically changes the narrative, especially as it starts to integrate to other events, because then you start remembering these other salient factors of the event that are not necessarily danger related. And then you have this sort of a bird's eye view. You can remember how you felt, you remember what you went through, you remember all the details. And I've even checked with people, 8 years, 9 years since we started this stuff, and asked them about that original event, and they're like, yeah, that happened. I never think about it. It happened so long ago. And what's great too with some of the storytelling that we do is that when someone is able to process and work through and tell their story, that starts to change it in the brain. And so the storytelling is so important. It's
storytelling, yes, 100%.
Yeah, so we do. If you look up online with the Hero's Journey, it's nonprofit. We do storytelling for veterans. We also do storytelling in some of the retreats. Like I do one of the retreat locally.
Let's talk about some of these resources that you're a part of that are not only helping from the mental health aspect in terms of truly treating veterans. But also those resources you're a part of that are just like therapy outlets and ways to bring veterans together and ways to provide positive stimulation if during their transition. Because you're part of, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 maybe groups?
Yeah, a bunch of them. So one of the things we call them therapeutic retreats, because it's like, even though we're accessing all these tools and stuff, it's like we're not doing what you do in a medical setting. And we're using approaches like equine assisted learning, where you have group activities that people work together towards a common task to get on the same page. It's one of the things I love about the retreat model is that you get people out of their environment, you get them together. Most of the folks who come to our retreats, they've all been in the same places, different times, similar experiences, and that again creates that tribe and that family, and they have this kind of connection that you haven't had in a while. So we do that. We do other body-oriented therapies like a neurofeedback, cranial sacral therapy, trying to bring things into an alignment, the accelerated resolution therapy, and at the end of the retreats, like the one I do at the Quantum Leap Ranch is Warrior Mission at Ease. At the end, we do storytelling, and this is with a different group. It's with the Fetterman brothers, and we'll
Homefront Foundation.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll have that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get them on. I'm going to get them on this season, definitely.
Yeah, good guys. And they're awesome. It's a one-day workshop, and the stuff that we can work through, especially because we've been working on the other end in all these other areas.
Yes.
And so people will choose either the event that they worked on going through the memory therapy, or just some other event that's important to them. And it's just it's an amazing process. I've done work with Lone Survivor Foundation. I do some work with a veterans group in South Georgia called the Peace and Home Project, and so they use accelerated resolution therapy, but they also do therapeutic riding. So we're looking at doing some actually trail riding and camping and stuff. And so I'll go along and work with these groups and provide the support. And is as part of the group. It's not like you might go to a training or something, speaker comes out, they do their thing, then they go away. And some therapists are like that too, but it's like with our veteran community, that's not what people need. They don't need that. You had too many experts already telling you what to think and feel and what to do. And you just need people to spend time with you, to be real, to provide information and experiences so people can get the tools and resources they need to work through this. I also work with HUA, which is a ranger organization that helps us at the Veterans Alternative, which I work with. One of the other retreats that we do is one where we take guys to Ireland to play golf. So we work with them in the morning on both the memories that they want to work on, but with their relationship with their injuries.
Okay.
So then when they're on the golf course working with the golf pro, we've been working on how it feels to be relearning how your body works and everything. So that's another performance aspect. So not just the negative parts of it, but also how do I start to perform and excel? Especially with people who've excelled in the operational environment, they've excelled, they've pushed themselves further, they've learned about themselves, and you can do that. You just have to find new ways to be able to do that. And golf is one of those challenging things to do that.
One of the hardest things to do is to hit a golf ball straight.
Yeah.
So from a personal standpoint, because I do want to hear a psychologist's standpoint of dealing with a lot of these external issues from other people, how do you keep yourself from adopting all that energy as your own, from neglecting your own mental health, physical health, emotional well-being? How have all this information that you've researched and start helping other people apply, how's that helped you in your growth, in your evolution, and inevitably your success in life?
So that's where all of this started. My interest in mindfulness and everything was all in college, and trying to manage the stress of going to college, and that would be a whole other long story of how integrating it. But that was around the time in the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s, when a book by a guy by the name of D'Amato came along, and he's called Descartes' Error.
Okay.
And he starts to put the emphasis on the role of memory in the limbic system, and all this stuff that's going on, and actually started spurring a lot more research and everything. Now our understanding of the body, it's like emotion and sensation that come before thought. Yes. Thought can create emotion and sensation in response to it, but most of the time our thinking is trying to make sense of our experience. And the vast majority of our decisions are based in the emotions, not our reason. We think we're reasonable people, but we're not. That's why we're so reactive and we get so upset. Like even on the way here, it's like I was on 275 and I'm looking out the window and signaling because I know there's a blind spot in my Jeep. And as soon as I do that and I look over, some guy's waving his hand and beeping the horn and just freaking out. And I'm just like, okay. I looked over to see if somebody was there. Apparently somebody's there, and I'll just let him go and then get over. I don't have to react to that. He's not a threat to me at that point.
Yes, that's big. Reacting to everything, you don't have to react to anything.
Right.
We have the choice. We feel like we don't have the choice because all we've been programmed and taught, and every person and entity we've observed does it this way.
Situational awareness and vigilance will help you to identify threats and select from actions in which to address it. Hypervigilance is like the lack of a threat, but your body's responding as if you've already identified it. And then that's why people will overreact in the environment or overreact internally. And so kind of guiding people through this process and helping them to understand what's going on in the body is a big part of what I do, because it's and also trying to doing podcasts and talks like this, getting this information out there so that people can frame their experience.
Yes.
It's like when you start to understand what's going on in the body, you start to move away from the idea that there's something wrong with me to that, oh my God, this is what my body's doing. If there's something wrong with me, I don't know what to do about that, but I know what to do with my body. I've been trained to do this, I've been trained to do that. Well, why can't I train in this other area? Why can't I train to make these improvements? Like we were talking yesterday about emotional intelligence and other things like that too. Again, mindfulness helps to facilitate that. It's just paying attention. When we're so focused on our goals, That's where sometimes we get a bad rap in other cultures, where the cultural norm is, like in France, where it's like it's a little more laid back, and the idea is like you go into a shop, the shop owner takes, the shop worker feels like the shop owner and takes pride in what they do and stuff, and so you greet them and you have a little bit of a conversation. You acknowledge them for what they do, and they're a lot more helpful instead of walking in there, hey, I need this.
Very American.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Yeah. We're here for one thing and one thing only. I'm going to purchase this and get out.
Yeah, and as a culture, we haven't always been like that. You read the literature from the founding fathers and people of that time. It's like their connection with nature and the environment was so important. Right now, we just want to scoop up the environment and see how much money we can make off of it. And
it's not even real.
Yeah.
Money's not real. Like, that's what I've come to over the last 2 years, is how I'm completely shedding all of the constructs that I thought were real, that I thought I had to be in society, that I thought I had to work this job and do this and achieve that and marry this person and have these babies then and like finally it just became so overwhelming with all these expectations that I've created for myself based off of the programming from culture. And none of it's real. And
that's television and your family, because people who from those generations where the goal was to get married, have kids, get a house, and and it's like work for the same company till retirement. We don't really live in that environment anymore. We have a lot of freedom, which kind of freaks people out. But you have the freedom to kind of create that.
Now you got to figure out.
What's
happiness, and it's not money, it's not toys, it's not all these things that we were led to believe happiness is made from. No, happiness is made from the relationship with yourself and the love you push out into the world. That's what I believe.
Yeah,
I've lived on both extremes.
Well, in the research on happiness would tell you that having meaningful work and meaningful relationships and connection, really equates with happiness. Happiness is not achieving things. There's plenty of people who have achieved great things and enjoy things, but that's about it.
Like Steve Jobs on his deathbed said, "I wish I would have lived more." Go figure. One of the most successful, quote unquote, men to ever walk the planet. Wish he would have lived more. What does that mean?
Exactly.
You didn't define that.
Yeah, each of us need to, and for some people it might be taking the time to take a vacation, but sometimes it's like reducing the clutter and the more crap you own, the more crap you got to keep up with. Trying to simplify your life. This is one of the criticisms of a lot of millennials. And it's like you look at Harley Davidson sales are down, and then I was just reading something the other day too. It's like the tariffs have killed their profits, and all kinds of interesting things that are happening in our society, like millennials not buying homes. But when you look at it, they're making similar decisions to the baby boomers who are retiring. They want experiences. They want things that have more meaning.
When we have our youth and not in our older age.
Right. Right, so it's creating this kind of cultural shift, because people are looking at, unhappy my parents and grandparents were when they're working and striving and doing all this stuff, and it's like, well, how else can we live? And
we haven't exactly adopted the best world given to us by the baby boomer generation. I mean, in the last 100 years, it may look like we've technologically advanced, medically advanced, all these advancements.
Yeah, it's all there.
But yet our souls are decaying, our sense of well-being is decaying, our sense of purpose is decaying, and it's like eventually some generation is going to wake up and see that all these institutions and all these systems of living aren't working, just because people want to believe that they do. What you believe and what is reality.
They function for what they were designed for.
Yes, 100%.
But we need way more than that. That's why it's like, again, with the approach that we're doing, using all these different modalities and then addressing the story, we're working with the individual on their story. And we get our sense of self from the experiences that we've been through. And when we're able to embrace that and accept it and be okay with it, then we're able to use that to go forward. So to visualize the future, most of the time, if you're in an elevated state, you're only visualizing what danger to avoid or how can I make this go away, whether food, alcohol, achievement, accomplishment. When you're in a calm state, when your parasympathetic nervous system's engaged, you can use your imagination to visualize, so many different things.
There's a lot of times where meditation has become foundational now. There's a lot of times where I need answers and I can't figure them out. And like you said, I calm my central nervous system. I get into my meditative state, and then everything just starts coming. The blockages go away, and then all the thoughts, all the moves I need to make, they all come to me effortlessly. And it's you know, we live in a society that's go, 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 work 100-hour weeks. The harder you work, the more you achieve.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm learning it's the complete opposite. The smarter you work with the right amount of time will help you achieve everything.
Yeah, and working more efficiently. What happens is because, you know, we're tired, we're stressed, we're disconnected, we waste a lot of time in other environments, you know, rather than just focus, here's the work thing and then here's the social thing. Back to that visualizing again, it's like one way to look at it is it's an exercise that I'll give folks is to imagine if you won the lottery, which people all do from time to time, but really just embrace it and break it down. How would you spend that money? How would you spend that time? And then break it into two categories. The one category is what would this money save me from, deliver me from, change my, what dangers or bad or uncomfortable things that bother me would this money correct? And what could I create or become? Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'd be investing in a lot of the veterans groups that I work with, you know, and in some of these things that I believe in. I'd be paying off my student loans, which goes on the danger side of, but it's you know, it's like it's you being able to use our imagination in that relaxed state. So when people do that exercise, at first they start thinking about what do I want to escape, what do I want to get away from, and then if you linger in it long enough, then your mind starts to wander to those other things. And those other things, if you do that, might help you to see how you can do it on a smaller scale.
I think society teaches us how to survive in a way, but doesn't teach us how to thrive. Because I think there's two completely different mindsets, a survival mindset and a mindset that helps someone thrive. Like you said, survival mindset is everything's a threat, hypervigilance at all times. You're always looking for a way to change your circumstance, improve your circumstance because something's not right. But then when you and then with that, everything is heightened. So in your central nervous system, and then when you're in a state of thriving, everything's a lot more relaxed. You're a lot more calm. You're a lot more present, and you start to see the abundance that your life has and is. And from there, you can even get even more. So one of my favorite sayings is super simple: is like attracts like. What you think about yourself, about other people, about what you want is exactly what you're going to get. Even if it's not what you really want, how you're thinking about it is how you manifest it. Because again, if thoughts and consciousness are formed on the unmanifest plane, then we truly, you know, our vibes attract our tribes. Like attracts like. What you think becomes your reality. It's
absolutely
so true.
I mean, and there's we got like 40 years of like social psychology research that backs a lot of that stuff up. You go into a new environment, and if you have the belief that no one's going to like you, inevitably you're going to act in such a way as people aren't going to like you.
Yes.
You know, a lot of that perception, but sometimes that perception comes from experience. Sometimes that perception is can be observational learning from other environments. A lot of that's about learning. And there's memories that are associated with that, and you can work on any of those memories. Our bodies were designed to get to a rest state. You know, not just, and we force it, you know, with alcohol, food, you know, you eat so much you don't want to do anything. And if we can find that balance, there's a lot of things that happen. It's like that parasympathetic state, rest and digest, plan for the future, connect. You think about relationships, you think about your legacy. It's like, what do I want to pass on to my kids? Where you're in an anxious state, you're like, oh, I need to find a spouse, I need to get kids, I need to do these things to, you know, because it's like, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that comes from an anxious state, not a contemplative one. It's like dating with all the date websites and stuff too. It's like, again, people's goal is to get something, get with somebody, or get this kind of person like we date, like we shop for cars, rather than just living our lives. It's transactional. And we think that if we do all things the right way, then we're going to get exactly what we want. Happy. Yeah, when we'd be happy. No, you start by being happy first. It's like when I have a client who tells me, it's like I really want to learn to dance and go to a dance. So it's like I'm waiting to find someone who'll go dance with me. And I'm like, well, if you want to find someone who dances, go where people dance. You know, it's kind of simple.
But it's so hard, though. It's such a hard concept for some reason. Again, because we're always reaching for something somewhere else, and never really taking the time to see like we are everything we are enough for ourselves, we're enough for the world, and we have everything we possibly need to reach the levels of happiness and success that we strive to be. So that being said, you know, if there was a sage piece of advice you'd give a transitioning veteran right now, what would it be to help them overcome some of the depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, PTS symptoms? Like, what is your, over the 20 years of psychology, of treating veterans, special forces community, what have you come to, in a very succinct way, like what have you come to conclude that is a really great piece of advice to help these people?
You got to work on your story. and you got to be connected to others. And you got to develop that personal mission, that family relational mission, and a community mission. Because everything that you've done is serving the one on your right and the one on your left, and the country.
Yes. Before we close out, I want to let you talk a little bit about Last Out, the eulogy of a Green Beret. It's coming to the Straz Center. It's a play. It's coming to the Straz Center from the 11th of February to the 14th. And you can learn more about it at lastoutplay.com. Talk a little bit about what this play is about and how it's helping the veteran community.
It's written by a retired Green Beret, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. If you look him up on YouTube, you'll find his TED Talk, which we call Rooftop Leadership, and he talks really about the Village Stability Program, about one of the missions of the Green Berets is to build those relationships with indigenous forces, meet some of their needs, teach them to defend themselves, and build these allies in this community. The play is phenomenal. I mean, it's like anyone who is has a military background, has family in the military, you've been deployed, there's so many aspects you can relate to it, and it's focused on the individual and their family and their relationship with their family throughout the whole play. But there's just so many other nuances and stuff that people can relate to and connect to. And one of the things that Scott's doing is he's not just telling his story and his family's story, he's telling
everyone's story. Thank you so much, Doc, for coming on the show. You can learn more about what he does at his website, balancedlivingpsychology.com. I would like to thank you all for joining us again this afternoon for another edition of Vetting America. I'd love to thank our host and my producer, Anthony Kovic of the Tampa Post, and our sponsor, Angel Francisco of S Marketing. That wraps up another day here live at the Attic Cafe in downtown Tampa. I really appreciate all of you tuning in, and if you could share this video and this knowledge to some veterans in need, I'd be so grateful. Have a great afternoon, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.